Welcome everyone to Accelerating the Future, Bioscience and Technology Forum, jointly hosted by Chinese Bioscience Association and Monte Jade West. Our organizations came together to create this event because we believe that it is through the intersection of differing ecosystems in which we get new, great ideas that become fostered through this discovery. This is our second joint event. We held one last year in person, and we're looking forward to doing more joint events coming down the line. Today, our moderator will be Celestine Schnugg, founder and general partner of Boom Capital, and we'll be joined by a great panel who I will introduce a bit later. My name is David Jane, chairman of Monte Jade West, and I will be your host today, along with Dennis Chang, president of the Chinese Bioscience Association, and Ying, who is the director for clinical and scientific affairs. Just as a reminder, this event is recorded. If you have any Q&A or any questions for the speakers, please put them into the Q&A function within Zoom. So you are free to log them in there. Feel free to upvote them as well as you see the questions pop up. And for the chat room, if you have any general conversations or questions between attendees, feel free to pop them in the chat window at that time. Panelists will not be responding to the Q&A or the chat function itself at this current time, just because they're going to be focused on the panel itself. Monte Jade was founded in 1989 by immigrants from Asia. They were bonded together to support one another because they were under-networked and under-resourced. Through this community, billions of dollars of enterprise value was created, and hundreds of companies were formed. Even to this day, Monte Jade is focused on building community. We do this today under 3 pillars. Our first pillar is our interview series, in which we celebrate notable community leaders through understanding their personal journey and how they overcame those challenges. The reason we focus on journey is to better connect these great leaders to the next generation of leaders to come. The second pillar we focus on is on technology forums such as this one. This enables our members and our partners to discover new opportunities for not only investments, but also career opportunities. We've recently held talks on venture investing and also AI. The last but most important part of our pillar is our mentorship program. Our mentorship program is 100% volunteer run, focused on helping building the skill sets needed for our future leaders. Eastern Asians are currently underrepresented in the leadership of many Bay Area technology companies, and Asians continue to lag their peers in being promoted. White males are promoted at 2 times the pace of Asian males, while white females are promoted at 3 times the rate of Asian females. This disparity has gotten worse over the last 2 decades, and our mentorship program strives to address this inequality. The 6-month-long mentorship program is focused on education, deep engagement with small mentor families to address some of these challenges. We've just started our open house for our fall program. And if you are interested, please visit our website and we will have more open houses so you can learn about the program. At this time, I would like to thank our virtual series sponsors, Deloitte, Venture, Pack Law, and also Silicon Motion. We also have annual sponsors as well that are more focused on our physical events, but because of COVID, we've now moved fully to a virtual event format. From that, I will pass it to Dennis.
All right, thank you, David. So first off, I just want to let everyone know it's definitely a really good opportunity for all of us to get together to learn more about not only on the AI front, but also understanding a little bit more about investments as we're sort of moving towards a technological world, right? And so how do we power the work we do through technology? And I think we already have a really great speakers today to really provide that insight. But similar to Monte Jade, I want to kind of share a little bit about CBA and who we are and what we do. So CBA, we're a nonprofit organization founded in 1997 in the heart of San Francisco. Currently, we have about 1,000 active members and email subscribers with various backgrounds, which I will show a little bit later who we are. But essentially, our mission or the work we do is really simple. It's really to bridge the knowledge and understanding cultural gaps in the industry across global and building upon strong partnerships from an educational perspective with various organizations in the life sciences arena, but also organizations like Monte Jade West. So again, like I mentioned, you can just click through it. So we have, similar to the other organization, we have 4 pillars, and that's really our sort of gold standard for our mission, right? And so for us, our mission is run to promote networking. We have several events throughout the year. well, prior to COVID-19 era, to really promote networking, but really trying to figure out how we could build a network through virtual environment, not only for our local professionals, but also on a global scale. Also promoting awareness, enhancing public awareness as the progression and development of life sciences industry. We also, our mission is to update and educate, providing a platform for all of us to engage and discuss key trends in life sciences, as well as encouraging scientific innovations to really address those unmet medical needs. And also fostering collaboration, establishing collaboration with partnerships such as Monte, Jade in areas of mutual interest. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick slide kind of showcasing the different life science professionals that we have within CBA. Again, like I said, we have over 1,000 members and email subscribers ranging from research development, business development individuals, as well as management and medical device and diagnostics. And we have a wide range of professionals from PhDs to masters to folks who are in executive management levels. And also we have a lot of students and graduate students who have moved from all over Asia to United States to the Bay Area to learn and foster and building their relationship with professionals in this area. Next slide. So, you know, the success of CBA wouldn't be available really without our sponsors, right? So I won't go into each of the sponsors, but I just want to showcase that we have a lot of sponsors who have really dedicated not only their monetary support, but also support through throughout the years to really make CBA a top-notch organization in the Bay Area. Okay, next slide. So I'll pass it over to David.
I was on mute. Well, at this time, I have the great honor of introducing our great panel here today. First off, Celestine Schnugg is founder and general partner of Boom Capital. They are an early stage fund for deeply technical, under-networked founders building companies of consequence. Investment themes include computational health, synthetics, machine intelligence, serverless computing, containers, autonomous, aerospace, and computational genetics, synthetic biology, and life extension. Prior to Boom, she was an innovation partner at Schmidt and Dror Berman's VC firm, Innovation Endeavors. She has received the Top 100 Most Innovative People Award in 2015. Some of her notable investments include Mammoth Biosciences, Swarm Technologies, System1 Biosciences, FaunaBio, and FaunaBio. Secondly, we have Peter Liu, the founder and chief executive officer of Adagene, who is an experienced entrepreneur, passionate on devising a sustainable biotechnology business strategy by leveraging the industry's most advanced technology and intellectual properties for novel product development. Dr. Liu has focused on studying the fundamental mechanisms of proteins, protein folding, and design principle, and particularly by computational and experimental approaches for the last 20 years. Prior to Adagene, Dr. Liu was the co-founder and chief technology officer, president and director of Abamaxis, Inc., which was acquired by Merck in 2006. Dr. Liu then served as director of biologics technology at Merck. And prior to that, he served as the first lead scientist in computational protein design and protein laboratory at Zencor. Next, we have Tiffany Kuo. She drives and defines product and commercialization strategies for biotech, medical devices, and digital health products. Currently, she is a senior manager driving product portfolio planning for Microsoft at Health. She has experience in commercializing diagnostics for low and middle income countries with a global health organization called PATH. And prior to PATH, she was a life sciences and healthcare manager at Deloitte, where she consulted organizations on product, business, and launch priorities for innovative drugs, medical devices, and digital health AI products. Her experience also includes shaping and marketing strategies and running operations as a co-founder of a personalized YC-backed startup, Multiply Labs. Tiffany holds an MBA from MIT Sloan and a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from Rice. Colleen Heisley practice focuses on food and drug law with a particular emphasis on product promotion, advertising, compliance, counseling, good manufacturing practice requirements, product recalls, FDA inspection, competitor issues, enforcement actions, and she advises on issues surrounding regulation of drugs, biological, food, dietary supplements, medical devices, cosmetic products, both by the FDA, USDA, and other federal and state agencies. She has substantial experience with regulatory oversight, compliance assessment for due diligence on audits of drugs, medical device, and food companies, including those related to product safety, product labeling, product marketing, advertising, and consumer complaints. At this time, Celestine, would you like to take over?
Awesome. Thank you, David. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. I'm so excited to have this conversation with this incredible group of panelists. We really want to present some of the inside thinking from Silicon Valley on everything from regulatory to company building. And we are going to try and make this super fast pace and cover a lot of territory. Each panelist could easily have this entire session. And we're really hoping that this is engaging and interactive. So absolutely type your questions into the chat feature, and we're going to do our best to incorporate them throughout, and especially at the end. So we are going to start with Colleen. Colleen, if you want to join me and go off mute. So Colleen is incredible. She is one of the leading advisors on the regulatory front guiding entrepreneurs and companies through the FDA approval process. And so we're going to dive in to both like a broad kind of sweep around what the FDA is thinking about right now, and then specific tactics to try to guide some of you entrepreneurs and investors around regulatory approval. So first, Colleen, we're going to start with an open-ended question of just what is top of mind at the FDA right now.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be participating on behalf of Jones Day. I am a regulatory and compliance counselor who works with near market and aftermarket companies in regulatory and compliance counseling, and I'm happy to share whatever thoughts are in my head that will help you move along your thoughts in your head. So to address your question, Celestine, what's top of mind for FDA right now? And it's not surprising that FDA is dealing, just like everyone else, with the ramifications of the coronavirus. And they are, given where all the products that they regulate and their helm, their seat at the table for their part in administering the response to the public health emergency, a lot of their time and effort is dedicated right now, and they are focused on addressing, through their ability to allow products on the market, things that will be responsive to COVID-19. That being said, they are absolutely understanding that their redistribution and their redeployment of their resources to focus on COVID-19 has real implications to everyone else in the regulated industry, those folks who are not pursuing a COVID-19 diagnostic or a therapy or some adjacent therapy. So they are working hard to make sure that their other responsibilities don't fall away, that they're not lost. They have been highly transparent that they're working towards maintaining their PDUFA and MDUFA goals for product reviews and approvals. They've been trying to maintain and upkeep their momentum on inspections, even though they had to move to a virtual inspection process except for critical cases, so that industry could be assured that just because they weren't in the COVID fight directly, that their benefit to the public's health as an ongoing matter weren't lost. So we're not surprised that that's where FDA's focus is, but they are focusing on other areas. If you're thinking about, broadly, what are FDA's agenda items, what are their priorities from a policymaking standpoint? On the therapeutic side, with CBER, it's your regenerative medicine. With CDER and CBER, it would be drug and biologic competition. And ensuring that there is a competitive market. That's one of the platforms that the administration ran on, right? That we're going to make drugs affordable. And we saw a permutation of that come out in an executive order yesterday. But there are things down at the administration level that FDA has been doing to enhance the ability of generics, quote unquote, or biosimilars to get to the market. So that's top of mind for them right now. They're also dealing with their component of the opioid epidemic, And so obviously with their oversight of drugs, they are the gatekeeper for what gets on the market, whether it's it's an analgesic to treat patient pain, or like a naloxone to treat their reaction to an overdose to a pain medication. So they are front and center in the discussion of what needs to happen in the long term to provide safe drug use for patients who need it. And then I guess, right now we are at the forefront of, so we're at an evolutionary stage with medical devices. And so we're seeing that CDRH, who has long been, we'll just say in industry, there's a lot more disdain for CDRH historically than the sort of the respect that it's compelling us to feel now, because it is stepping up to recognize that traditional hardware approaches to device regulation don't fit. And while they have laws and rules that have been interpreted, they need to be evaluated in light of the significant changes and evolution we're seeing in technology. And so that's a key area for them right now.
Great. And if you are in the current process of getting approval from the FDA, is there anything that one should be doing, just with most focus being paid on COVID right now?
Sure. So one of the things that FDA is recommending is they are attempting to keep the lines of communication open, but they're also asking for patience and understanding that some resources have needed to be redeployed. So I have not heard of any primary reviewers being reassigned, but your primary reviewer may have additional responsibilities, right? The highest level folks that have sort of been redeployed and reassigned and given greater oversight, are like on the Woodcock level or on the Jeff Shuren level, and they're not in the weeds looking at an application, although they're obviously called in to help weigh in on close calls where divisions need it. So I think keeping your goals in mind is key. Being in communication with FDA as needed is essential. If you need guidance, you should still be requesting it. If you need to be making submissions, you should still be making the submissions in a timely manner to move your applications forward. If you need to request a meeting, you should do that. What FDA is hoping folks understand is that given the virtual environment that they're working into and the redeployment of resources, is that, hey, it may take longer than X period of days to get you on the calendar. We are looking at those type A meetings, for example, being pushed back. We are looking at FDA trying to figure out how they can do pre-approval inspections in a timely manner so that they can meet PDUFA goals. I think the way that people reduce frustration is by being, by asking FDA and trying to get their best answer, but recognizing that there's a lot that's just like it's not in our control, it's not in their control either.
And how about for those that are submitting for the first time? I mean, is now a good time to do that? Do you recommend waiting? Like, what advice do you give to people who are just starting the process?
Sure. So, I think there are practical aspects there, right? So FDA has stated, hey, we are open for business for everybody, but you might want to temper your expectations. We still have these goals that we're going to be beholden to. It might be a bad year for goals, but we're going to have to report back on that at some point and be accountable for it. FDA wants folks to keep moving forward, but as a practical perspective, whether you do it in month 1 or month 4 or 5, I think is, there are business considerations and the timeline, whether you have the flexibility to wait to wait to make that application to where there might be some more stability and a greater way to gauge the timeline in which you'll get the feedback from FDA that you'll need. I think a good example would be with the PAI. If you have something in queue and that your facility needs to be inspected, but FDA is unable to do inspections, do you have the wherewithal to wait a month until you get a clearer picture about whether FDA is going to be resuming holistically all their inspection activities? Is there a process that you can engage in to figure out whether you might qualify for an alternate method of being inspected. But those decisions come down to, have you already told a group of people that you're gonna apply by the end of beginning of Q3 or not? Are there people counting on you to do, to live up to certain expectations, and you would rather not defer that expectation? So there's some balancing that need to go on with your understanding of where the agency is and what they're committed to doing versus where you are in your business, and thinking about whether you have any flexibility in your timeline to get to where you want to be in that period of time.
Great. Let's dive into just machine learning and any other new technologies that you might want to cover. How do you think machine learning and computational drug discovery is going to be regulated? Where is their authority, and what are some of the trappings, and should it even be?
Sure. So that's a really broad topic to cover. Let's start with we were talking about software first, right? Software.
We can do software, yeah.
Yeah. So software as a medical device, FDA has been dealing with, and they're wrapping their heads around ones and zeros, and they've been doing that for quite a while. And they've come up with guidance on how software as a medical device fits into the existing framework. So whether a 510K is required, whether you need to go down a de novo pathway, whether a PMA, pre-market approval application would be required. To that end, most do fit through the 510K, ultimately fit in the 510K pathway, and then it becomes, well, how do you maintain that product? What considerations are there, because software changes, right? Software, you develop it, you evolve it. What threshold of change necessitates you going back through the FDA? And for traditional hardware-based devices, there was always an algorithm, sort of a decision tree that one would work through. And what FDA has done is sort of take that decision tree and translate it into the software world. And that's part of a current guidance document that's called Deciding When to Submit a 510K for a Software Change to an Existing Device. And so you refer to that to see where you come through and whether FDA would expect that you go back through them for a change to your software. There's plenty of room for interpretation within the guidance, and it's important that one document why you make changes, or not, sorry, why you make certain decisions and decide to go through FDA or not go through FDA. Because at the end of the day, if an inspector comes through and understands what he's looking at when he's looking at a device history file and your rationale for not coming through the FDA, it should be captured there. And while they can disagree, it's better that you have cataloged your thinking and they say, come through and we'll work through this with you, versus not having captured it, which suggests you didn't think about it at all. So reasonable minds can differ about what the result is going through the decision tree, but being able to articulate to FDA why you made the decision you did as captured in a memo or the decision tree itself is important. It's an important topic of conversation, and can sort of convince an inspector that you've gone the right path anyway. Now, what we're seeing now is, we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're layering on artificial intelligence and machine-based learning on software as a medical device. So things that, it's not locked, it's not something where the sponsor is going to go back in and flip a switch and then go through FDA and figure out, go through this guidance document and figure out whether they need to proactively go through FDA, or whether it's a change they can make without going through the agency. This is technology that is designed to learn from itself and make its updates and go and move forward, all to benefit based on data that's gathered from multiple sources, and update itself to make the outcome better for the patient, the outcome better for the user. And so FDA in 2019 put out a white paper that suggested how they were thinking about the regulation of artificial intelligence and machine learning in medical devices. And we're putting together for comment those thoughts. Now, we haven't seen any more movement on that white paper, but it did lay out a way of thinking about what you would expect the device to do over its life cycle. So taking a total product life cycle approach and sort of planning in where you expect it to go and creating good practices around where you expect it to go. So you have a plan about where it's to go, and you design the plan in a way that convinces FDA that you won't need to stop and see them as a gatekeeper at every iteration, that you can see enough into the future about what the product is supposed to do, and you have some backstops about data collection on what you see it doing, that FDA should feel comfortable allowing the software to do what it's supposed to do and evolve. So that has been outstanding. It's not, everyone's very excited about artificial intelligence and machine learning, but it's not without its detractors who are concerned that it may be too much too fast. And that's particularly seen by the folks who might see their jobs change because we have, new technology in the radiology sphere, right? For example, where you have devices that may be doing work that human beings used to do. Now, I think an example of where I've seen things change in radiology to share would be at my earliest involvement in AI. The device was posed as basically a spell check for the radiologist, right? Did they code things right? Did they type things up? It's gonna check the health record versus the picture and just do a double check and prompt the user to fix something if it was captured incorrectly. Well, moving on, we've got things that are going to help you guide where you take pictures and guide what you write and guide how it's captured and guide how it looks over time in a record. And that's scary to some folks. It's something that will ultimately benefit healthcare, but pulling back the human element, can involve some risk, and it can make people feel squeamish. And so I think essential to some companies' plans, from an FDA perspective, is making sure that it can be done safely, to the benefit of the patient. And then from a sort of the usability, the acceptability of what you're doing, how do you deal with those folks who are squeamish? How do you deal with the user who needs to deploy it, or the patient who it's going to be used with? Then I think you also asked about the artificial intelligence use in drug discovery, and it's absolutely being used to sort of shorten the time to identification of viable candidates. So if it has traditionally taken 15 to 20 years to go from a compound to market, starting with 10,000 different compounds and whittling down to the one that gets approval, a lot of that time was spent in the early years trying to whittle down those and find a viable candidate. Well, harnessing AI to look through vast amount of data is allowing folks to identify better candidates quicker. So we're cutting down on the sort of the front end evaluation or identification of a target and their validation. There's also folks who are deploying it to say, well, what polypharmacy can we use? What can we put together in a way that is going to be beneficial for human use, or for pet use for that matter? It's also being used for drug repurposing programs. It's being used to deal with biomarker identification. It's being used for pharmacovigilance purposes and enhancing research literature and publications and patent identification opportunities. So that is very useful for a lot of folks. I think the drug industry is making good use of it right now. From a regulatory practitioner perspective, I don't deal with a lot of what they're doing with it, because when they come to me and we start working with the FDA, they've already got their candidate identified. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a role for an appropriate lawyer to play in that identification. I work closely with patent lawyers who are knee deep in the identification and whether you can, did you find something that was patentable? Did you find something unique that you can protect? And that goes into the discussion about whether you move forward. You could have the greatest idea, for a therapeutic, but if you can't garner any protection for it, Is that something that your company wants to do, or are you gonna pass it down to somebody else? Did I cover everything, Celestine?
That's amazing. Colleen, I wish we had the entire day to talk about this. I'm sure there's many questions from the guests as well. So please, at the bottom of the screen, there's that Q&A button. So please press that and submit some fantastic questions. In the meantime, we're going to transition to Peter. Peter, I see you, and we're going to have you go off mute. So Peter, I'm going to come in hot with the $1 million question. As the former director of vaccines and biologics for Merck, are we getting a vaccine?
Yeah, I think, I believe, Celine, we will definitely eventually get a vaccine, no question about it. And it's more about the speed and the quality of the vaccine. Means how many variants of those COVID-19 will be covered by that vaccine, and how fast those mutants will happen to bypass those vaccines we make. Yeah.
And so I didn't prep you on this, so we can kind of redirect if needed. But what are some of the things that you're kind of watching and monitoring with COVID, and how are you kind of assessing the situation? And feel free, we can move on to.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think, Corinne, for COVID-19, and this really make me recall maybe 10 years ago when we're talking about avian flu. And this is exactly at that time, we sort of predict, what's going to happen. But at that time, everybody is scared, alerted to that the pandemic flu, especially avian flu. And I did actually quite a bit of studies, and also, to understand how this thing happened, and how we can prevent from this. And to me, the COVID-19 is just the worst nightmare was we predict for pandemic flu, right? So it's just different virus. But what it happens is just like in the avian flu, because at that time, what people worry about is those viruses, they could jump from one species to the other. For example, they jump from bird and to become effective humans. And if you look at those informations and those variants and mutants, you will find the difference between, say, a bird and the human receptor is tiny difference, just 2 or 3 amino acid difference. So at that time, basically, the conclusion from who and the expert in the field, the prediction is the question is not about if, it's about when. So, fortunately or unfortunately, this didn't happen for the flu, but here we go, we get the COVID-19. And it's something, some virus that might jump from species, right? There's all kinds of speculation how this thing could happen from other animals. But what happens is this thing they become a worst case. They just jump to humans, and it can infect humans in all kinds of, depends on which newspaper you read, all kinds of nightmare scenario, right? What it means is when virus, they have this mutations happen, they can jump from one animal species to the humans, and the human, those differences are pretty small. And then this become a global pandemics. Yeah. So of course, the other thinking about one thing is thinking about the vaccine, but I also thinking about maybe before we really get a vaccine, we should thinking about neutralization antibodies, because antibody is much faster to make. And if you say have 1, 2, or 3 neutralization antibodies, they cover different variants. And by using 1, 2, or 3 combination, you might cover this kind of flu, say more than say 80 or 90% of the patients. Then you will have a pretty good control at that time, because vaccine usually takes much longer than antibodies, right? Because you have to use that to stimulate the immune system, and it depends on different people's immune system. The response to those vaccines could be different. But as far as the neutralization antibody, you can just make them. And in fact, some barrier company, they actually come up with speed to make those antibodies, sort of like in 6 months or even shorter. It really depends on regulatory framework. If they say the framework in this kind of urgent case, they might say relax. Usually they want to ask you to test a stable cell line for many, many generations for stability. And in this case, you might just say, make the pool and give it to people who need that. And in this way, I think you might bring down the pandemic in a short time, and then thinking about a long-term strategy to come up with effective vaccine, because that does take a long time, to test it. Yeah.
Thank you. So one question that came in that I'd like to put in the mix right now is, this question is from Ying. Do you think any one vaccine can work, or eventually is it going to be a combination of vaccine that's going to work against COVID?
Okay, yeah. Again, that's a very good question. I think I still like to take the example from, flu. We know in flu season, every year, we always make a new, we just have a vaccine. We sort of predict this year what's going to happen based on those evolutionary data or mutant changes. And even in this case, we still might escape, miss certain big flu virus in certain years. But what's good about this, because you have a bunch of collections, and eventually, just like you said, if you have a bunch of different vaccines and combine them, and or use an old vaccine, even though they cannot control the total specific strain for that year, but still they have some cross-reactivity effectiveness. So people still can benefit, maybe not 100%, but still you might benefit, say 70%. So yeah.
Awesome. So let's pivot a little bit. We can touch upon COVID again. We're seeing some great questions come in, so keep them coming, whether it's through the Q&A or just through the chat or any private messages. So transitioning more into general innovation, how has COVID-19 accelerated innovation, and what are some of the new technologies that you're really excited about right now, whether they relate to COVID or not? So sorry, that was kind of a confusing one. How would you say COVID-19 is accelerating innovation?
Yes. I think perhaps to everyone is, first of all, people realize, health, life science is very, very important. Because in Silicon Valley, we're usually very excited for technology, right? New generation of iPhone, whatever new technology. But here we go, we realize the technology iteration or new generation comes very fast, right? Like Intel has done that. Every 1 or half a year, you get a new generation of CPU. But in terms of in medicine, this didn't happen that frequently, except for flu, right? So this really puts the health science on spot. Can you do something like technology, right? Come up with a solution very quickly. I think that technically, we really come to a stage we can really speed up that, revolution. But I think about the two issues could still slow down this compared to technology. First, this is for human use. Therefore, you still have to go through the clinical testing and the GLP, whatever, requirement, regulatory requirements. And also we know the FDA, because for the benefit of patient safety, the system is, compared to technology, is more rigid. So then the COVID-19 basically asking us, when we're facing this kind of crisis, how rigid a system we should have, compared to say absolute safety versus say with safety in control, but we can get into the human faster. So I think that's a challenge. It's not just a technology issues. It's more like a regulatory issues. I think Corinne already shared that insight. I'm not a regulatory guy and also not a legal guy, but I do think, although I innovate in drug discovery, I do believe the speed for innovation and for predict those molecules are much faster than what we can achieve before if you combine computation, artificial intelligence, all that kind of thing. But the question is really regulatory and also I think public, how much they like to take this risk right, intensive response.
Well, luckily we have Colleen on the line still. So Colleen, do you want to share some quick thoughts based on what Peter was just sharing with us?
Absolutely. The one thing I'd want to chime in and say, that the pandemic has caused a shift in healthcare delivery that we may not come back from, in that there are an abundance of people who have experienced their very first telehealth visit ever during the duration of this pandemic. So receiving digital health services where you are not in the same, an experience where you're not in the same room as your healthcare practitioner was novel to many people before the pandemic. It will not be when this is all over. Alongside of that come all the tools that entrepreneurs come up with to facilitate those interactions, to create data and information that the practitioner then relies on. We have seen FDA loosen, they've come up with enforcement discretion policies that allow folks who have remote devices that allow for monitoring of healthcare that are typically used, say, in a healthcare situation, hospital situation. FDA has come out with guidance that says, hey, look, validate it and don't come through us. You can just deploy it for home use, right? That is something that they would normally be FDA would serve as a gatekeeper to double check what a company has done as they want to transition from in-hospital use to home care use. FDA has said, you go ahead and do it under this enforcement policy. You go ahead and do that, and we'll just check in with you if we see a problem. Now that's hard to move back from, right? I know the benefit risk balance shifts in non-pandemic times, but a demonstration that you can remotely, monitor or administer or do, some drug or device related thing during the pandemic is good evidence to use to convince FDA that it can be done outside of the pandemic. We've also seen plenty of people, new entrants into the medical device space, for example, who may not go back to just doing traditional goods, right? So we've got new folks making thermodynamic scanners. We've got people making non-contact thermometers. We've got folks trying to come up with a panoply that's going to take your respiration, or so your pulse ox, your respiration, your temperature all at once, and these great big gates that you will walk through as you come into, I don't know, your basketball game, right? There are folks who are trying to come up with tech solutions to give that will be useful to the world moving forward. And those people who have stopped thinking just as themselves, just as a general tool maker, and started them thinking of themselves as a device manufacturer, are going to help shift and evolve everyone's thinking. So I think that's one of the real ramifications to industry globally, is we've got more participants. We will likely see greater flexibility in the agency, and that greater flexibility and more entrants allow us to get more data that can compel our story forward. Okay, I'm blathering. Celestine, you can thank you, Peter, for the deferral to my comments on the regulatory side.
No, that was awesome, Colleen. And I'm also going to invite Tiffany. Do you have any comments on this, or should I patch you in soon? Tiffany, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
No, I love the conversation right now, because as I think about what's exciting for healthcare, especially having being somebody who worked very deeply in life sciences, but also, worked a lot in digital health, we've definitely seen COVID, like Colleen was saying, like Peter is saying, kind of open up the adoption of digital health technologies in the population. And I've been working with so many clients to help push telemedicine, to push digital health devices adoption, consumer digital device adoption, and there has been so much resistance. But with COVID, we're really seeing the floodgates open for both regulatory individuals being more open, like Colleen is saying, to adopting something digital, but also consumers trying to find a different way to manage their own care. And we've been talking about kind of having patient in control of their healthcare data, and kind of putting back the care in patients' hands. But realistically, without kind of COVID and without people focusing on COVID, it was it was a trend that was slow to realize. But with COVID coming, with COVID being such in the forefront and center, it's been really exciting seeing how care delivery is now becoming more digital. People are more engaged in their own healthcare, looking at different ways to maybe diagnose, keep healthy, track their own metrics. So this is an exciting time for somebody who has worked so long in digital health.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And just me as a VC, I'm just so excited now because Silicon Valley no longer has this monopoly on innovation, and the barriers to pitch VCs and just for us to fund companies out of network have totally come down. So that's a really exciting thing that I'm seeing in my world. So Peter, let's go back to you. I'm going to zoom out of COVID and focus specifically on some company building aspects, given your entrepreneurial background. So what are your thoughts on this bifurcation around life sciences investors and a lot of the tech VCs starting to invest? You have a fantastic list of VCs. You have some like very fantastic Silicon Valley players. You also have Sequoia China. So also curious how you see some of the more traditional players here investing in China, and how do you, sorry, I'm going into too many questions. Sorry, let's take that first one of the bifurcation between life sciences investing and tech VCs starting to play in the space, like my firm.
Okay, yeah, great. I really think yes. In fact, I think there's a great time at the 2000, and at that time, President Clinton, claimed that the human genome being solved. I really personally at that time I believe, human health or humans will come to a digital world, because in the end we realize all our informations are digitized in those DNA sequence, right? So all the humans or other animal species is like a development plan already encoded in our genomes, and the rest is just a development program. So, and from there, of course, what we get used to in biotech is still, people wear a white coat and, look at the test tube and look at the mouse and the humans. But then I think from that time, some people realize, maybe what we should look first is look in the digital world, right? Look at our DNA sequence. And then look at for example, this happened already at that time. We talk about the IP, right? You first want to protect that digital sequence, the gene sequence for proteins, which might cause cancers and other issues. And diagnostically, you really want to look at your humans' genomes instead of one specific mutations. And in fact, since then, companies like, Illumina, they have been very successfully moving into this world. Right now, I think, look at the human genome sequence, right? And basically, you go there, you sequence 1,000 human genome. That's the slogan at that time, right? So I think that really changed the things. Of course, that's getting information. Then people ask, I get those information, but I cannot do anything. For example, if I know I'm going to, subject to, breast cancers, because the family, genetic reasons, what can I do? Of course, the second thing is, can we look at those and develop a drug, right? Design those drugs, and this also happens very quickly. And you can see recently companies like Delays and including ourselves, we do computational drug design has been for a long time. Not only we believe those target protein, they could not only get a 1D DNA or protein sequence to 3D the protein structure, the target structures. In fact, they're in the 4D because those targets can moving around kinetic space, right? So that really shows this information from 1D sequence information go to 3D structure information and the 4D how those protein interactions. Eventually, that's a network how we develop, how we get trouble with disease. And then if that's the problem, then how you design the drug to targeting those misfolded protein or those mutations cause cancers and all this, right? So then you work in that digital world, but in the biotech world, you still need to come up with a drug to put into the human. So then that you can combine with high throughput screening to identify, those candidates most relevant. Then you can put into animal test, put into the human test. And then, of course, doing those global digital things, I think Silicon Valley has a big head start compared to other parts in the world, right? But in terms of looking into the animals in large scales, and also even test in humans, especially for some rare disease, Asia like China, they could offer opportunities, right? Because the apparently has a more young skilled workers, right? A big population. So I think it's that kind of combination really, if we can do it right and do it well, really can help to bring down the health costs, healthcare cost, because we know in the US the healthcare costs are so high, and then eventually that really challenges the whole system, right? I believe the same thing for other countries. And the question is, how can you bring down, a new drug usually take 10 or 20 years, and more than 3 billion right now, people talk about 7 billion of that. And of course, those investments eventually will come from the consumer, the patients. How can we reduce that, reduce the speed? Is really the, this kind of thing we're talking about, the combination of IT, technology with BT biotechnology. Yeah.
Awesome. So kind of building off of that, if you weren't building what you're building at Adagene today, what are some opportunities that you think are really exciting that people should consider investing in or building companies around, whether that's technologies or directions? Yeah, so any thoughts on that?
Great. Yeah, that's
I'm
really
taking notes, by the way, on this answer, Peter.
yes, of course, it's a biased opinion, right? But anyway, because I mean, it's a panel, right? We just share our personal insight. So I think, Serene, at least through the introduction, you already did something, I think, ahead of the game, right? For example, you're doing some synthetic biology. I do think those are the good futures, right? Because we know, and with those digital information, our gene sequence, protein sequence, you can synthesize them, right? Go to artificial intelligence to ask, can you design more functional molecule, right? Rather than testing everything, you can just with your prediction of computational power, only test those things that will be most relevant, right? And synthesize that with synthetic biology, and then put into the animal to test before you put to the humans. And of course, we actually did something. I think this again go to the species cross-reactivity. I talk about flu because at that time I looked at those viruses and how they could jump from, say, bird to humans. If you look at few mutations there, then one thing is, can you test something they could potentially cross-react between, say, animal like a mouse, monkey, before you move into humans. And for immunotherapy, that's really an important test because the traditional animal models we use intentionally lock out the immune system. That's the way you let this tumor grow. But on the other hand, for immunotherapy, you really need that immune system intact. Then the question becomes, how can you test that? And so we come up with some ways we can design molecules that can cross-react with the mouse. And then you can test mouse models for tumor or other disease, and then test out the efficacy. Then in combination, and then you move to the monkey test of safety. Then you move the same molecule into the human to test that. I think that this will offer a much cost-effective way and a much more translational, high fidelity way to test those things. And instead, right now, if you look at the, you ask me what's exciting for immuno-oncology, many exciting things. But the issue is, you will notice people, like a PD-1, PD-L1, a lot of people to test the combination with PD-1, PD-L1 into human clinical trial. Those are very expensive proposals. And before you do that, why don't you come up with good molecule design? You can test in animals to ask if are efficacious and safe before you move into the humans. We're doing that kind of thing. We think this will be, much more direct, cost-effective, or more ethical before you move into the humans. Yeah.
Awesome. Peter, thank you. So we're going to go to Tiffany. So Tiffany, building off of some of the stuff that Peter said and some of your earlier comments around how COVID is changing healthcare, what are some of the other innovations that you're excited about? I mean, you have a fascinating seat as you're a YC founder. You went through the Y Combinator program. You are an investor, and then you're also at Microsoft Research, pioneering fascinating research around healthcare and artificial intelligence. What are some of the things you're excited about?
Thanks, Celestine. Thanks, Peter and Colleen, kind of for your great introduction. I think a lot of things that is exciting in terms of digital health has already been touched upon, such as AI for drug discovery. We talked about telemedicine and virtual care. I think just a few things, just to switch things up a little bit, that we haven't talked, may not necessarily be as on top of the conversation as we talk about AI and healthcare. A few things that are interesting particularly is actually manufacturing. So how do we leverage data and technology to improve small batch manufacturing, maybe even personalized manufacturing, not just for clinical trials itself, but as we think about more personalized therapies coming into markets such as CAR T, and those needing just-in-time manufacturing. What kind of technologies can we bring to play, really leveraging data and AI and even a more efficient manufacturing system to improve that current bottleneck that we have. Other areas that I'm thinking about that is extremely interesting include digital surgery. Every single large medical device companies, J&J, Medtronic, they've been in the digital surgery, robotic surgery field for a really long time. And we know that, for example, Google and Verily partnered on a company regarding digital surgery, and J&J has since then bought over the rights to the various companies and kind of integrated both software and hardware into thinking about how do we reinvent the surgery room to make it so surgery isn't something that's only for specialized physicians, but maybe can we democratize surgery, especially some of these more simple procedures. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for technologies such as HoloLens or and computer vision aids to be integrated in digital surgery. Of course, I would say maybe that's a larger investment, something that's a little bit far in the future, not in the next few years, because there's a lot of regulations regarding this and a lot of potential risk. But that's also another kind of moonshot that is always on top of mind and interesting to me. A few other interesting things that I'm thinking about that may be closer to getting to market. One is especially connecting real world evidence to value-based contracting. And this is a pet peeve of mine when I was working in consulting and working with life sciences companies to get products to market, and really been through so many market access related conversations where the pricing of a drug is based on what somebody models in terms of economic output. But is there a way really to, since there's more prevalent data, is there a way to really mine EMR records to a specific individual and take some of these metrics to better understand what is the positive outcome, and how do you actually then translate that into contracting, the price that a patient may pay or a price that may be ultimately reimbursed for the drug. And that is that there's still, data is helpful. There's still probably a lot of systematic changes that need to happen. As we all know, there's so many different players in the space, with PBMs, with pharma company, with hospitals, with payers, insurers, and individuals. But I think there's a lot of opportunity kind of with the prevalence of digital, with data, maybe even patient owning their whole own healthcare record, that can start accelerating some of these. Another area that's also interesting to me is thinking more about virtual clinical trials too, instead of, and I think there's so many opportunities here, right? As we look at various devices coming onto market, I know Evidation ran a virtual clinical, I had been thinking about virtual clinical trials when I was at Deloitte. We were thinking about how to help build virtual clinical trials for patients. But I mean, of course, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of reasons this is interesting, but for me, it really, I think, increases the patient population that can ultimately be enrolled in trials. And if we talk about, underrepresentation of minority, it's, not only in the work environment, but also in clinical trials. And ultimately that impacts the efficacy of the drug, the relevance of potentially some, the data points to an underrepresented population. So these are a few things just off the top of my head that are extremely exciting to me. Maybe not necessarily the ones that are always in the front of people's tongues, but I'm sure you guys know those already.
That was awesome. So I'm going to ask this question to Peter and Tiffany. In your experience being and operating in Silicon Valley, what are some of the kind of mistakes that you see deeply technical entrepreneurs or peers make? And what advice do you have for them to build out their network and to, especially with some of the Monte Jade work around mentoring, to find a mentor and or even pitch their company? So any advice for really deeply technical entrepreneurs?
Maybe I'll take a stab at this and I'll pass it on to Peter. So to give a little bit of background of the startup that I was working in, Multiply Labs, our concept was use 3D printing and precision robotics to create a personalized medication. So you only have to take one medication a day, but we deposit specific substances within your pill so you don't necessarily need to, so everything's in one component, and we vary the thickness of the shell, so your body digests disintegrates the shell at different times, and so there's multiple releases. So this is definitely what we would also consider as hard tech, and it was very interesting for us, especially as we were going through YC as one of the first large batch of healthcare startups or life sciences startups. I think when we were kind of in the Valley 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of deep understanding in terms of what it takes to bring a healthcare product to market. I remember our YC partners always asking us, why can't you just beta test a pill with your customers? And our answer was, because we don't have a GMP facility. We can't just 3D print something in our backyard and ship it out to customers. That's dangerous, non-ethical, and also illegal. But I think, when we were going through that process, we, of course, stood our ground on those specific aspects of what was legal and not legal, but there were constantly individuals pushing us to think, why don't you go B2C? It's easier to get to market that way. Why don't you think about, working with maybe a younger population that's closer to your, that you understand a little bit better. The concept of, learning fast, trying is something that was constantly instilled in us. But I think now, taking a step back, I think what I would have done if I were to rethink or my founder experience is be really clear about what we wanted to do, which is think of building a product for personalized medication, and really stuck to that gun and find investors that believed in our mission. Of course, we had to be open to adaptation, but find investors that are open to our mission. Maybe engage ourselves more with healthcare investors than what was maybe more tech investors that were interested in healthcare at our point in time. So my kind of overall advice is truly believe in what you're doing. Always, of course, be open to advice, but find mentors, investors, people doing something similar to you, and realize that there's always going to be a lot of noise and a lot of people trying to give advice to what they think could be good for your company, but really take a step back and think, are they really coming from the same place that I'm coming from? Are they really in the same field? And be a little bit more critical in terms of how you shape your company.
Awesome. That was great. And I want to keep building off of that. So when people come to you and ask to be mentored by you, Tiffany, what is a good way? How do you think people should approach that? How do you have that conversation with somebody that you want to have as your mentor?
I think most of the time I want to mentor somebody is because I feel like somebody really I am able to see somebody really with a drive. They have a relatively clear goal in terms of what they want to achieve in life, not necessarily the exact career they want, but they are passionate about something, and it's just that they may not necessarily know how to maneuver their way there. So when people approach me for mentoring, I tend to respond better to those who are very passionate about something, to those who have an idea that they want to execute, but they just don't necessarily know how to execute. And this is probably very similar, Celestine, in terms of how you invest in founders too. You find maybe founders that are very passionate, very driven, very somebody you see could be successful. It's just a matter of helping them how to get there. And so when I have mentor conversations, I always try to probe and gauge, how motivated is this person, how much do they care about their specific mission. That's kind of the barometer that I use in terms of whether or not I continue building a strong mentor relationship and continue to follow up with these individuals.
Thank you. Peter, do you have anything to comment or any advice that you can add for technical founders?
You might
Sorry.
be on mute, Peter.
Great. Yeah. So I think maybe I can share some experience because I think what's good at the Silicon Valley, tech people here, people are willing to take a risk. And also the strength is that most people are passionate about the technology. They do know something about the technology more than other people know. But the question to me is, you really have to figure out how you are going to use that technology to solve a real question, right? It's not something question you come up in your own mind. And maybe it's true, but on the other hand, you really have to test it. Asking those experienced people, especially in biomedical, the clinical people, they have seen a lot because to them, no matter how good is your technology, can you solve those real clinical problems, right? So therefore, in the beginning, you might be frustrated because biomedical science related to humans is always a little conservative in general. But on the other hand, I think if you can figure out what's the real issues there, because sometimes the issue they perceived may not be, the angle could be different from yours. And in this case, I think that you have really, break down the problem, almost like, someone, Elon Musk like to take a first principle, right? Because when the question becomes very convoluted, sometimes you don't know what's the real issue. Then you break it down until you see that core issue you break down can be addressed by your technology, and convince about that, and ask people about his experience. Then I think you should stick to that. And at this time, you will still find a lot of investors will be questionable about you, and also other people, just based on the, experience, overall experience, but they may not go beyond that, that feeling about the problem. Actually didn't dive into the issue, go to the bottom of the issues, right? So you can ignore those questions, those people, have doubt about it. But on the other hand, if people, they do dive into the issue and they really point out the core issue your technology try to solve, you have to face it. You have to be honest to yourself. Are you ready? And your technology is mature to solve those issues. And if you're certain about that, then I think you're eventually finding the people who share that kind of reasoning and a passion with you, and get the investor, are willing to work with you on those issues. Because in the end, the truly innovative thing, only a few people actually can say that, right? Unless they spend a lot of time to do that. And those are the true believers. And then you can work with them, have that time. Of course, you have to be also a little realistic. How much time you are given, how much resource you can show, a proof of principle, have this more concrete plan. Because you cannot want people to open a blank check, right? To support you like for 10 or 20 years, right? You have to show concrete progress for those, yeah.
Peter, thank you for your sage advice. So I'm going to take a moment and open it up to you three. I'm sure you would have loved to have chat with each other as well. I kind of hogged most of the time with you. But do you have any questions for each other before we move to audience questions? And before we do that, we have some fantastic questions that have been queued up. Keep them coming either through direct chats or through the Q&A button below. And before we do, please feel free, Peter, Colleen, Tiffany, is there anything you guys want to know across each other?
For me, when I meet another entrepreneur, I'm always really curious about For Peter, kind of what would you consider your biggest challenge as you were building your company, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is really find talented people, right? And they can work in a team, because usually very innovative, talented people, right? They have their own strongman ideas how things should be, and to putting them to work in a team, because I think for biomedical science, it's a teamwork, right? For drug development, it's like a lot of like a software you see that in your garage, you write it, and then you do that, right? And then work for a long time, and really to get those people together to share the vision, and also they can compromise, right? If things they do run into conflict with each other, they can still like to work in a team. I think that's in general the challenge, but that's the fun part of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I very much resonate with you. Actually, I had 3 other co-founders, so it was 4 co-founders, all with very different expertise, but very complementary expertise, and figuring out how to work together the first few months, plus going through YC. That was a very fun, but also rewarding challenge when we finally cracked that nut.
Yeah.
Peter, Colleen, anything on your side before David takes us into the questions?
Oh, sure. I'll ask a question of Tiffany and Peter, because it's always interesting to hear about the startup's experience. From the practitioner side of things, I'm used to working with companies who have great ideas and a great abundance of energy, right? And they expect me to bring the same to bear. And I am in a position to do that. I've worked with colleagues who like a slower, steadier pace. And that's perfectly fine. There are different flavors for everyone, right? And so I would ask of you, when you're looking at your patent counsel or folks to guide you through the capital raising process, or for regulatory counsel, what is it that you look for in an engagement? What do you think are good characteristics for a small startup to look for in an individual attorney or a firm?
That's a very good question. Yeah. So, Tiffany, you want to go, or you want me? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can share that. In fact, I do think the lawyers are very, very important part of the whole thing for tech company. I think just like you mentioned, you can have a great ideas, but if you not have
I didn't pay Peter for that endorsement of lawyers, just so you know.
Yeah, I think because in the end, I think the investor that invest money, they expect some return, right? That's right. So, and then you have to make sure not only you have a great idea and you can actually bring investor returns, and in this case, basically you have to work with savvy lawyers. They're not just apply get the IP for you, advise you how to get the IP is protectable, right? It's tangible and is defensible, and right, and give you the position, and also they make business sense, because IP, good IP protection is very expensive, like a PCT and all those. But I think those are very essential for technology companies, right? Because you only have technology and IP actually for a long time before you really have a product. So in this case, I think a good lawyer, not only they can guide you how to protect it, also they can tell you in what's make a business sense, right? What kind of a claim, and also how you claim it, and to protect your technology, right? And also to can get you the partners, and also if someone get in to try to repeat what you're doing, and you can get them in violation and all that kind of thing. So I think it's really important to find lawyers, partners. Of course, the contract lawyer are also very very important, because you'll realize you can sign a deal if you don't take care of those legal things right, and then later, many years later, once your product or your partner with someone come to the market, you may or may not get the return. And but was technologist, you actually may not be savvy enough to realize that. Sometimes you just have to work with experienced lawyer to do that. Yeah.
And for us, I mean, the one most important thing, especially as we were looking at the seed stage or early stage companies, finding lawyers that can help defer fees. But past that requirement, we really saw our lawyers and our legal counsel as just another arm of our founders. And exactly like Peter said, it's not just the legal advice that we're looking for, but how do they really push us and challenge us to think through what is the business case and is our product really unique? For us, because we really had to work, we had a relatively innovative manufacturing process, especially since we were manufacturing small batch pills. Our FDA lawyers were extremely helpful in helping us think through strategically how should we not only be building our product, but building a product that we're more in line with how maybe the FDA is starting to think about personalized manufacturing. Also even helping us think through what is our strategy to converse with the FDA. When do we do it? At what stage of our process? And of course, I think another thing that was helpful for us is to have a law firm that was comprehensive, not only just in FDA, knowledgeable about FDA, but also had some expertise in terms of maybe HR related issues, also investing, and oftentimes they were able to connect us with the right lawyers in the field where they may not necessarily have expertise. But as a small company, especially when you don't necessarily know what kind of legal guidance you need, we kind of saw our lawyers as the one-stop shop to help us navigate the multiple different landscapes and help us think through what our regulatory strategy could be, both for product but also for marketing strategy, claims, and all that. So it was, and ultimately we had to go with different types of lawyers for different specializations as we grew as a company, but very early stage, kind of the all-rounded lawyer that can help us think strategically and defer fees is what we really were looking for.
Great.
Oh, is that David?
That's me.
Awesome. Go for it, David.
All right. So we have a few questions out here. This first one is for Colleen. Have you seen or are you anticipating the number of drug or devices approval by the FDA or other health authorities decline in 2020 due to the pandemic, due to kind of limitations of the physical world?
Okay, so I'm going to get my magic 8-ball out and shake it. So if we're talking about a new chemical entity or PMA approvals, I think it would be naive to think that COVID will have zero impact on the timing that all of the slate of these products get to market. But do I expect those numbers to be 50% of last year's? No, I wouldn't anticipate that, given what FDA has signaled, that they are committed to meeting the MDUFA and PDUFA dates, that they are deploying other resources to try to get the job done. I think the facility inspection, we do know that FDA is trying to restart that for domestic facilities. They have also been using sort of their virtual inspections, right? So if you're engaged in the process, if you're in line for approval, you may be providing information to the agency about your manufacturing operations more on paper-based. You may be interacting, with the agency different ways to achieve the same end, to give FDA the confidence that the manufacturing facility is ready for prime time. You can also expect that it's not just FDA that may be the cause for delay. So if you're on a clock, if you're on a PDUFA clock, and your own operations have slowed because you need to work remotely, or you're going through rotations where people are taking time off because they're required to cycle through, right? Which is reality for a lot of companies who have to furlough some folks for certain periods of time. You may be delayed in your responding to the agency or getting them the information that they're asking for. So it's not just the agency delaying. There's a potential for the applicant not to have the resources to pursue with the full gusto that they would normally have as well. So that unbalance, but the question is asked about holistically what's going on. Like, so, you know, to be candid though, if we move the camera back and we look at the totality of devices and drugs that will come on the market in 2020, I'm going to say that we are going to far exceed last year. For the sole reason is that, do you know how many new, hundreds of new companies are manufacturing source control masks, right? They're doing it under emergency use authorization. They're doing it consistent with CDC guidelines, and they're all medical device manufacturers. So if we look at it that way, it's been a good year for therapeutic products.
Fantastic, thank you. This next question here is for Tiffany. This is from Robert Leong. Can you expand upon your concept of virtual clinical trials? Like, what are the kind of the key pain points that this would solve, and like, where do you think this opportunity would expand on? And after you respond, I would love Peter's take on this as well.
Yeah, and to just define virtual clinical trials a little bit more, it's, right now for clinical trials, essentially for each visit, you would go to a doctor's office multiple times during the clinical trials to take additional stats on your on whatever outcome you're trying to track. And so it's actually quite physical, right? And oftentimes these trials are done in large centers and large academic centers, which then ultimately precludes a majority of the patient population, unless the patient's willing to fly. Oftentimes pharma companies are willing to pay, but it just often takes a lot of time out of an individual's day. And so generally you would find that, for more pervasive conditions, of course, in every single trial, you tend to set guidelines to have a diverse population, but for more pervasive and prevalent conditions, you tend to have a slightly worse representation for maybe the minority or folks outside of the city. But of course, for more rare diseases where, people are more willing to take out their day to improve a rare disease drug, you'll see a little bit more diverse of a population. And so what I think for virtual clinical trials, what this specifically means is, instead of checking in with your physician maybe once per month in person, you can take some of these as a telemedicine consultation. You can use various other ways, whether that may be a personal blood pressure monitor, for example, if you need to track your BP, or sometimes they partner with local hospitals and local physicians for you to take some of the metrics that you would need for clinical trial outcome tracking. And so essentially, I think the opportunity that it opens up is to really democratize or to increase the number of patients that can really be enrolling in this trial. And ultimately, the importance of this is that it can change as we look at the outcomes, right? The outcomes of a specific trial is based on a larger, more representative population of the US than just a very specific population. So that means that the outcomes can be used for, of course, there's stronger data, but that also means individuals will have a better understanding of, for a specific type of population, whether that be income or racial, how to really think about prescribing a drug. So there's higher efficacy for the drug prescribed.
Great, Peter, you want to?
Peter's laughing, smiling.
I think it's the cameo from David that we were enjoying.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Actually, I already intend to ask, Stephen about the personalized manufacturing. By the way, I really think the CAR-T therapy, right, is really putting this personalized medicine into the hotspot, right? Because there, everyone's T cell is different. Just like, if we mention about the COVID-19, you will find the strain, the virus could be different, and the people's immune system is different. The response could be very different, right? How you select the right population, apply the right vaccine, and to match that, right? So I really think those are the great biomedical questions now. I really think technology is really positioned to solve those issues, right? You can think about someone has this iPhone, right? You get the blood, you take the blood, read out your immune system, and send out to a machine they match your immune system to someone else. Say those people respond to this vaccine, and this to the other one. Yeah. Of course, I think that the immunotherapy, a big question is really what we're talking about, precision immunotherapy. What it means is everybody's immune system is a little different. And how do you do that pick and match process? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I want to thank everyone that joined our panel today. Celestine, Peter, Tiffany, Colleen. It's such a great honor to have you on our panel today. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys all, hopefully in person eventually. It's nice to see you guys all virtually, but thank you so much. This was a great conversation. It spanned a very, very wide gamut of topics. We will be wrapping with a little bit of logistics on our side, and I'm going to pass it to Dennis really quick, so he can provide some insights on upcoming events for CBA.
Hey, thanks, David. And again, I want to echo to what David just said. Thank you so much for this really great panel, great insights into not only medical devices, but into the future of the drug discovery, development, and R&D, and your perspectives from entrepreneur side of things, and also investments, and also in regulatory compliance. I really appreciate that. And again, I really do hope that we get a chance to meet in person one day soon, hopefully. And so just really quickly for CBA, this year our main focus of CBA really each year is our annual conference, but really due to COVID-19 pandemic, our team really decided to cancel our annual conference set for October 2020, but we'll certainly reconvene in our planning efforts in 2021. So please stay tuned on our website about the events. But we have a couple of great other events this year, and a couple of them actually are in the works, so we haven't actually put it on the calendar. But certainly for the next one will be with Dr. Siwan Cheng, CEO of Formosa Labs, who will be giving a really great talk on his career journey from professor to entrepreneurship. And so more information will come out, so make sure you visit our website. And then on September 19th, we'll have Dr. Lingfa Wang, Director of Program in Emerging Infectious Diseases in Singapore, will give us a great overview on the era of new pandemic, obviously in light of COVID-19 and also the new second or even third wave that's coming. And then the other events that we're looking into is a public health awareness of the current COVID-19 and other infectious diseases that's planned later in the year. And also another event that we're in discussion with Monte, Jade, which is happening towards the end of the year, which is the blockchain and another great, exciting partnership with Monte, Jade.
Great. On the Monte Jade side here, we've got quite a few events coming down the line. We have a whole series again on our mentorship side, which is number one, thinking about how hiring managers work. So if you're thinking about switching jobs and switching careers, we really focus on behavioral interviews and less the technical side. So it's more the interpersonal dynamics of the interview series. We have an ongoing interview series with great community leaders, as noted before. We have a great event coming up by Deloitte talking about how to thrive within a post-COVID environment. And again, you can see all of our events coming up on our website, Q3, Q4, and then also going into 2021. We have a pretty packed schedule. I want to thank all of my team that's been able to put this together. Ton of volunteers, ton of time that they've invested into really, finding the speakers, finding the topics, finding the content. And I'm really proud of everything that we've done on our side. And this whole COVID world, and we feel your pain, CBA team, it has been really, really hard to transition from a physical world to a virtual world. So I really appreciate everyone coming out and supporting us in a virtual environment. I want to move next to our Monte Jade sponsors. Again, without our sponsor support, we wouldn't be here today. So thank you guys all for continuing to sponsor and support our community. We're looking forward to working with you both in a virtual world and also in a physical world where we can get out there as well. And then lastly, Dennis.
And again, thank you again. So we're certainly living in this really strange times, but I really hope that we could continue to foster this environment we're in, and I'll continue to build partnerships and really raise the awareness of life sciences, all the great things that's happening in our world today. And certainly through this partnership, we can make this happen. And again, thank you again to all the volunteers of CBA. We wouldn't be as successful without you. And also our CBA sponsors listed here. Thank you so much for all your commitment and your faith in the CBA community. Thank you.
And with that, we will wrap today. Have a great weekend. Thank you guys very much. Enjoy the beautiful weather outside today if you're in the Bay Area. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. Have a great weekend.